Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Helmi Wahyu, and I am from the Master of Mathematics Education program. I will present an article entitled Analysis of Fuzzy Thinking Processes in Students' Mathematical Communication at SMP Negeri 2 Banyumas. Introduction. Mathematics is one of the most important basic knowledge for the development of educational science and technology that is useful for the development of the nation. In mathematics, there are processes of thinking, reasoning, and communicating. To communicate in mathematics requires mathematical communication skills. This is in line with what was expressed by Muklis in 2014, page 413. Mathematical communication is also a factor that is considered in mathematics learning. In mathematical communication, it is very possible for the fuzzy thinking process to occur. In the English Dictionary, 2007:142, fuzzy has an unclear or vague meaning. Fuzzy thinking means thinking that experiences confusion between understanding and not understanding, or between remembering and forgetting. The fuzzy thinking process is produced from a spontaneous, inflexible, uncontrolled process and is shallow and vague. People who think fuzzy cannot complete work completely or correctly, but if they are helped a little, they can complete a job. The 8th grade students at SMP Negeri 2 Banyumas have quite good mathematical communication skills. Based on the results of interviews with teachers often encounter students who provide their assignments correctly, but are confused when explaining the results of the assignments they have done. Likewise, students who provide less accurate assignments are able to explain them correctly. Research methods. The type of research used is qualitative descriptive research. It is said to be descriptive because in this study, the researcher conducted an analysis and presented data systematically regarding the description of the occurrence of the fuzzy thinking process in mathematical communication at SMP Negeri 2 Banyumas. This research was conducted in the even semester of the 2019/2020 academic year at SMP Negeri 2 Banyumas. The researcher used the snowball technique to distribute written tests given to Class 8C, totaling 32 students with the material of a two-variable linear equation system for taking research subjects. After being invited to reflect using the TOL, Think Out Loud technique, there were 6 students who were included in the fuzzy thinking criteria, both correct fuzzy thinking and incorrect fuzzy thinking. Results and discussion. Based on the description and analysis of the written test results and reflections through interviews from 6 research subjects, the researcher grouped the final results or final answers based on fuzzy thinking characteristics. 3.1. Students who are thinking fuzzy are right. Students who have the correct fuzzy thinking process to determine the solution to a written test problem require 3 steps. When viewed from the results of the test questions and the results of reflection through interviews given by students, the researcher describes the thinking process of students who are thinking fuzzy correctly as follows. Figure 1. From the picture of the student's thinking process, who is thinking fuzzy correctly, it can be explained that the student is able to provide the correct answer according to the answer key of the written test questions of mathematical communication skills. This can be seen in the flowchart marked with a blue arrow. Furthermore, the researcher conducted a reflection through an interview, so the results can be seen in the flowchart marked with an orange arrow. This can be explained that the student is able to provide justification for step 1 of the results of the written test questions that the student gave. So the flowchart depicted between the test results marked in blue and the reflection results marked in orange looks overlapping. In step 2, the results of the written test work and the results of the reflection do not coincide, because the results of the reflect in step 2 in the second equation, the student is unable to provide justification for the answers to the results of his written test work, even though the answers to the results of his written test work are the correct answers. When reflection was carried out through interviews, it turned out that the student was confused when providing justification in step 2 in the second equation. So the student experienced a fuzzy thinking process. In step 3, it does not overlap because the answers given by the students show the correct answers and are in accordance with the answer key for the written test questions on mathematical communication skills. Furthermore, the researcher saw the flowchart with an orange arrow, proving that the student, when reflecting, was unable to provide justification for the results of the written test work in step 3 and was confused when reflecting. So the student showed the correct answer, but was unable to provide justification for his answer. So the truth of the answer was false. So if we look at the final results or final answers given by the student, then the student is a student who is thinking fuzzy correctly. Because the student is only able to show the correct answer, but is unable to provide justification for his answer, the truth of the answer is illusory. 3.2. Students who are thinking fuzzy are wrong. Students who have a fuzzy thinking process that is wrong to determine the solution to a written test problem require 3 steps. When viewed from the results of the test questions and the results of reflection through interviews given by students, the researcher describes the thinking process of students who are thinking fuzzy wrongly as follows. Figure 2. From the picture of the student's thinking process, it can be explained that the students gave answers to the written test questions on mathematical communication skills that had less than perfect answers. This can be seen in the flowchart marked with a blue arrow that has less than perfect answers in answering the questions. Namely, then the researcher reflected through interviews from the answers given by the students, and it turned out that the students were able to correct the mistakes in the answers given in the results of the written test questions. So the results of the reflection can be seen in the flowchart marked with an orange arrow. So the students were able to provide the right answers by writing down the answers. Namely, and from the written test results in step 1, the researcher then adjusted the test results with the reflection results through interviews from the answers that students wrote in step 1, and it turned out that students were able to improve them. In step 2, the results of the written test work and the results of the reflection look far apart because the results of the reflection in step 2 are different from the results of the written test answers given by the students. The answers to the test results given by the students turned out to be less than appropriate to answer the problems in the written test questions. This can be seen from the blue flowchart. Then the researcher gave time to reflect on the answers given by the students, and it turned out that the students were able to correct the mistakes in their test answers. This can be seen in the orange flowchart. So the student has a fuzzy thinking process. Next, the researcher looked at the flowchart marked with a blue arrow, showing that the results of the written test work in step 3 with the reflection results looked far apart because the reflection results in step 3 were different from the results of the written test answers given by the students. The answers to the test results given by the students turned out to be less than accurate in answering the problems of the written test questions. Then, the researcher conducted a reflection through interviews from the answers given by the students, and it turned out that the students were able to correct the mistakes in the answers from their written test results. If seen from the results of the test questions given by the student, the answers are wrong, then the researcher conducted a reflection. It turned out that the student was able to correct the errors in the answers to his test results from questions 1.A, point B, and point C. So it can be concluded that if seen from the final results or final answers given by the student is a student who is thinking fuzzy wrong. Results and discussion. Based on the results of the analysis of the fuzzy thinking process in mathematical communication that occurred in Class 8C students of SMP Negeri 2 Banyumas, several conclusions can be drawn as follows. 1. Correct fuzzy thinking in mathematical communication. Respondents with correct fuzzy thinking criteria, the thinking process changes. Initially, they can think correctly, as shown by the test results. However, after reflection, it turns out that they cannot explain correctly. This is because they forget, especially when determining the coordinates of the intersection points of each line with the x-axis and y-axis. One of the causes of forgetfulness is that when working on the test, the respondents asked their friends, so the answers did not reflect their absolute understanding. 2. Wrong fuzzy thinking in mathematical communication. Respondents with incorrect fuzzy thinking criteria, their thinking process changes. Initially, they cannot do the test correctly. After reflection, it turns out that they can complete it correctly. This is because respondents give less precise test results when reflection is carried out. It turns out that respondents remember their previous answers. Then the respondents correct the mistakes in the answers they wrote so that the answers become the correct answers. 2 respondents gave inaccurate test results, but were able to correct the errors in their answers when reflecting because respondents reread the story questions and reworked them according to the example questions in the textbook, so that the answers given by respondents became the correct answers. 3. Respondents were less careful when reading the test questions. When working on the test questions, they were confused and asked their friends, so that the answers they gave were inaccurate. When invited to reflect, respondents were able to correct the errors in the answers they wrote, so that their answers became the correct answers. 4. Respondents were confused when working on the written test and explaining the results of their tests. After reflection, it turned out that respondents were able to correct the errors in the answers they wrote so that their answers became the correct answers. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.